While I was in labor delivering our twins, my husband Robert emptied our joint accounts. $87,000 gone in a single morning. "She'll be too busy with the babies to notice for months," he told his brother over the phone. When my family lawyer handed me the bank statements 3 days later, I smiled, then quietly liquidated the trust fund my grandfather had hidden from everyone, including Robert, and watched as his carefully planned new life with my former best friend crumbled before it could begin. The contractions had been coming for hours, each one more intense than the last, when I heard the soft ping of my phone from the hospital bedside table. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Probably another congratulatory message from a friend who'd heard I'd gone into labor early. The twins weren't supposed to arrive for another 3 weeks, but they had other plans, just like my husband Robert, apparently. "Dawn, honey, focus on your breathing," the midwife gently reminded me as I reached for the phone. A bank notification. Odd timing. $5,000 transferred from our joint savings to Robert's personal account. My financial analyst brain perked up despite the pain. That wasn't our arrangement. We'd agreed all baby expenses would come from the joint checking account. Another contraction hit before I could think more about it, the pain washing over me in a wave that made the world go white. By the time it subsided, Robert had returned from his mysterious errand, slipping his phone into his pocket with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything okay?" I managed to ask between breaths. "Just finalizing some work stuff since I'll be off for paternity leave," he replied, squeezing my hand with just enough pressure to seem supportive. "Nothing for you to worry about now." As the next 12 hours blurred into a haze of pain, determination, and eventually the miraculous sound of my son and daughter crying in unison, that small financial anomaly was forgotten. Emma and Ethan Baker came into the world at 3:42 and 3:47 a.m. on April 18th, tiny but perfect. In those first moments of holding them against my chest, the world narrowed to just the three of us, their delicate fingers wrapping around mine with surprising strength. Robert was oddly absent during those first golden hours, claiming the need to make calls and set up the nursery at home. The nurses exchanged glances but said nothing. At the time, I thought nothing of it. He'd never been good with medical situations, and the birth had been complicated. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, as I had for our entire 8-year relationship. The first true warning came the morning after delivery. Lisa, my college roommate and still my closest friend despite living across the country, FaceTimed unexpectedly. "How are my godchildren?" she began, her smile warm but her eyes concerned. "Perfect," I replied, angling the phone so she could see the twins sleeping in their hospital bassinets. "Worth every minute of 36 hours of labor." Lisa's expression shifted. "Dawn, is Robert there with you?" "No, he went home to shower and grab some things." "Why?" She hesitated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear the way she always did when delivering difficult news. "I'm probably overreacting, but Chloe Taylor posted something strange on Instagram. A check-in at San Francisco International with the caption, 'New beginnings with my soul's true partner.' And there was a man's hand in the photo." "Lisa, there are millions of men in California. Why would that have anything to do with—" The man was wearing Robert's distinctive watch, the vintage Omega his father left him. The room seemed to tilt slightly. That can't be right. Robert's just at home, preparing for us to come back tomorrow." The logical part of my brain started making excuses. Maybe it was an old photo. Maybe someone else had a similar watch. Maybe... "Dawn, I'm so sorry, but I don't think it's a coincidence. Call him right now, please." I hung up and immediately dialed Robert's number with trembling fingers, the movement pulling at my IV line. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result, then sent a text. "The twins and I miss you. When are you coming back? The three dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. Taking care of some important things. Back tomorrow. Get some rest. Something cold settled in my chest, a feeling I recognized from years of financial auditing. The moment when numbers don't add up, when something is deliberately hidden. I opened my banking app, ignoring the midwife's earlier advice to avoid screens and stress. What I saw stopped my breath more effectively than any contraction. Our joint savings account, $87,000 we'd built over years of careful planning, showed a balance of $212.37. Our checking account was down to $843. A series of transfers had emptied nearly everything into Robert's personal account, which was no longer visible to me. All transactions had occurred during my longest stretch of active labor. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Baker?" asked Jenny, the day nurse, entering with pain medication. I locked my phone screen, a strange calm settling over me. "Jenny, could you do me a favor? I need to speak with my family lawyer as soon as possible. His name is Carl Winston. There's been an unexpected development." Jenny's eyes widened slightly, but her professional demeanor didn't waver. "Of course. Would you like me to bring you the hospital phone? Your cell reception isn't great in this wing. Please." "And Jenny?" I added as she turned to leave. "Let's keep this between us for now." After she left, I looked at my sleeping twins, their tiny chests rising and falling in peaceful unison, blissfully unaware that their father was betraying us all. The fury rising within me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, cold, precise, and absolute. Robert might have taken our savings, but he had no idea what resources I actually had at my disposal. The truth was, the financial analyst he'd met 8 years ago at a charity gala wasn't just a moderately successful professional, making a comfortable living. I was the granddaughter of Harold Morrison, who had built Morrison Financial Strategies from nothing into one of the most exclusive wealth management firms on the West Coast. My grandfather had insisted I make my own way in the world, proving myself on merit before anyone knew of my connection to him. The modest inheritance Robert knew about, the down payment for our house, was merely a tiny fraction of my actual family assets. What Robert didn't know, what no one knew except my grandfather, myself, and our family lawyer, was that on my 30th birthday last year, I had gained full control of a trust worth approximately $18.7 million. A trust I had kept secret not out of deception, but because grandfather had insisted I first find someone who loved me for myself, not my potential wealth. It seemed I had failed that test spectacularly. As the twins stirred in their sleep, I made a silent promise to them. Their father's betrayal would not define their lives or mine. Robert thought he was escaping with everything we had. He had no idea what was coming. The hospital room felt smaller the next morning. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over everything, highlighting the sterile reality of my situation. My body ached in ways I'd never imagined possible. The C-section incision throbbed with each slight movement, and my arms trembled from the simple effort of holding one of the twins. The physical pain, however, was nothing compared to the hollow feelings spreading through my chest. Robert still hadn't returned. His last text, sent at 3 a.m. "Need more time. Don't worry about the accounts. We'll explain everything soon." I'd spent most of the night cycling between nursing the twins, crying silently into my pillow, and staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship through this new, terrible lens. Had there been signs? The late nights at work? That had increased over the past year. The weekend conferences that suddenly required his attendance. His insistence that I stop working at the firm and take on freelance clients from home to prepare for motherhood. "Morning, Mama," Jenny said, entering with quiet efficiency. Her expression softened when she saw my red-rimmed eyes. "Rough night?" I attempted a smile. "Just new mom stuff." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She checked my vitals with practiced movements. Your lawyer called the nurse's station. He'll be here at 10. Thank you. I shifted uncomfortably. Jenny, could you help me shower before he arrives? I need to feel more like myself. 40 minutes later, wearing the only clean clothes Robert had packed in my hospital bag, maternity leggings and an oversized button-down that allowed for nursing, I sat in a proper chair rather than the bed. Small victories. Emma and Ethan slept peacefully in their bassinets, their tiny features perfect in repose. The simple act of washing my hair and brushing my teeth had restored some sense of control, however illusory. When Carl Winston arrived, his imposing figure filling the doorway, I felt the first genuine relief since seeing those bank notifications. Carl had been my grandfather's attorney for 30 years and had watched me grow up. His silver hair and perpetually serious expression belied a fierce loyalty to the Morrison family. Dawn. He set his briefcase down and took my hands in his eyes taking in the babies. They're beautiful. Your grandfather would have been proud. Tears threatened again at the mention of grandfather, who had passed away just 6 months earlier. He should be here to see them. He arranged for everything. Else, though, didn't he? Carl's voice held a note of grim satisfaction. I received your message. Tell me what's happened. As I detailed Robert's disappearance and the emptied accounts, Carl's expression darkened. He took methodical notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timelines and specific amounts. When I mentioned Chloe Taylor's Instagram post, his eyebrow raised slightly. Chloe Taylor, your former colleague at Westridge Analytics? I nodded. And my friend, or so I thought. I see. He made another note. And Robert has no knowledge of the Morrison Trust? None. Grandfather insisted, and I agreed. We wanted to be sure. My voice caught. Well, I guess grandfather was right to be cautious. Indeed. Carl's expression softened momentarily. Dawn, I don't mean to add to your burden, but there's something else you should know. I received notification this morning of inquiries into your credit. Someone, presumably Robert, has attempted to open several credit lines in your name. The room seemed to tilt. He's trying to steal my identity? It appears so. Fortunately, the additional security measures we implemented when the trust activated have flagged these attempts. Nothing has been approved. Carl tapped his pen against his notepad. However, it demonstrates a level of premeditation that concerns me. The implication hung in the air. This wasn't an impulsive decision made by a husband terrified of fatherhood. Robert had planned this, perhaps for months. The house, I said suddenly. Is he trying to sell our house too? The 4-bedroom craftsman we'd purchased 2 years ago, meticulously renovated for the twins' arrival. The nursery I'd painted myself, careful even with my growing belly, because Robert had been too busy to help. Carl made a call, speaking in low tones while I tried to process this new betrayal. After hanging up, he confirmed my fears. He listed it yesterday with Coldwell Banker. As it's in both your names, he can't complete a sale without your signature, but he knows a realtor who might not look too closely at paperwork, I finished. Robert's cousin Dean worked in real estate. Family loyalty ran strong in the Baker family, just not, apparently, to me or his children. Emma stirred, her tiny face scrunching before releasing a cry that seemed impossible from such a small body. I lifted her carefully, wincing at the pull on my stitches, and began to nurse. Carl politely averted his eyes, using the moment to arrange documents from his briefcase. What do I do now? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The weight of Emma against my chest, her complete dependence on me, crystallized something. This wasn't just about Robert's betrayal or my wounded pride. My children's future security was at stake. Carl slid a folder across the rolling hospital table. First, we need to protect what's yours. I've prepared temporary freezes for your credit and financial accounts. We'll need to act quickly regarding the house. I recommend an injunction preventing any sale or transfer of property. And then we go after him. I finished, a cold clarity settling over me. Carl nodded, a hint of the predatory lawyer visible beneath his grandfatherly exterior. He doesn't know what resources you actually have at your disposal. That's our advantage. He took our savings thinking it was everything, I said, looking down at Emma's innocent face. He has no idea. No, he doesn't. Carl began organizing. Papers for me to sign. And by the time he finds out, it will be too late for him to counter. A soft knock interrupted us. Dr. Patel entered, clipboard in hand, her expression professionally neutral. Mrs. Baker, I'm here to check your incision, and I need to discuss your discharge plans. You were scheduled to leave tomorrow, but given the circumstances, we may need to reconsider. Do you have support at home? The question hung in the air. The reality of my situation suddenly stark. I had newborn twins, a body still healing from major surgery, and a husband who had abandoned us all. The carefully prepared nursery, the freezer meals I'd stocked, the elaborate birth plan, all assumed Robert's presence and support. For the first time since discovering Robert's betrayal, I faltered. Where would I go? How would I manage? Alone? Carl placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. Dr. Patel, Mrs. Baker will not be returning to her current residence. I've made arrangements at the Morrison family estate. Full-time nursing support is already being organized. Dr. Patel's expression cleared. That sounds appropriate. I'll update the discharge plan. She paused. And Mrs. Baker? I'm very sorry about your situation. As she examined my healing incision, I exchanged a look with Carl. The Morrison estate, my grandfather's sprawling property that had been sitting vacant since his death, awaiting my decision about its future. I hadn't been ready to return there, too full of memories and grief. Now it would become our sanctuary. 3 days after the twins' birth, I was wheeled out of the hospital's side entrance, away from the usual discharge area. Carl had arranged this discretion after we'd discovered a disturbing voicemail on my phone that morning. Robert, slurring. His words slightly, demanding to know when I'd be vacating our house so he could get it ready for market. The April sunshine felt surreal against my skin after days under fluorescent lights. I cradled Ethan while a nurse held Emma, both babies bundled against the spring breeze. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb. The driver, already loading my meager belongings? Mrs. Baker? A woman stepped forward from beside the vehicle. She was perhaps in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a practical bun and keen eyes that missed nothing. She wore a simple navy pantsuit and carried herself with quiet authority. I'm Monique Griffith. Your grandfather called me his right hand for 22 years. Carl asked me to assist you during this transition. I vaguely remembered her from childhood visits to grandfather's office, the efficient executive assistant who had always had butterscotch candies in her desk for me. You worked with my grandfather, I said, adjusting Ethan in my arms, until the day he died. A flash of grief crossed her face before her professional demeanor returned. And now I work for you if you'll have me. The Morrison Trust includes provisions for my continued employment managing the estate and family affairs. Before I could respond, Ethan began fussing. Monique immediately stepped forward, her hands confident as she adjusted his swaddling with practiced ease. You have children? I asked, surprised. 3, now grown, and 5 grandchildren. A genuine smile softened her features. Harold, your grandfather, was godfather to my oldest. He made sure I could work and raise my family without compromise. Not common in the financial world 30 years ago. Something about Monique's straightforward competence cut through my fog of pain, and uncertainty. When she helped me into the SUV, securing the twins in their car seats with efficient movements, I felt the first stirring of hope since discovering Robert's betrayal. The drive to the Morrison estate took 40 minutes, leaving the city behind, for the wooded privacy of Meadow Hills. As we turned onto the long, tree-lined drive, childhood memories flooded back. Summers playing in the sprawling gardens, grandfather teaching me to swim in the indoor pool, holiday dinners in the formal dining room where I'd first announced my engagement to Robert. I pushed that particular memory away. "I've prepared the East Wing for you and the babies," Monique said as the house came into view. "It gets the morning sun, and I thought you might appreciate that." The Morrison estate wasn't a mansion in the showy sense. Grandfather had despised ostentation, but it was substantial. A 7-bedroom craftsman designed by a student of Frank Lloyd Wright, seamlessly integrated into the 5-acre wooded lot. The natural materials and abundant windows made it feel like part of the landscape rather than imposed upon it. "The nursing support Carl mentioned?" I asked as the driver parked near a side entrance. "Registered nurse during the day, nurse's assistant overnight, both with extensive newborn experience and impeccable references." Monique checked something on her tablet. "The day nurse, Catherine, starts tomorrow. I'll be here tonight to help." "You don't have to. I want to." Monique's tone brooked no argument. "Your grandfather did more for my family than I could ever repay. Helping his granddaughter and great-grandchildren is the least I can do." Inside, the house had been subtly transformed. The formal sitting room now held 2 top-of-the-line bassinets. A comfortable nursing chair had replaced grandfather's antique wingback. A changing table stocked with supplies stood where a display cabinet had been. "You did all this in 3 days?" I marveled, carefully settling into the nursing chair as my incision throbbed. Harold always said to be prepared for every contingency. Monique handed me Emma, who had started to fuss. "After you told him about the pregnancy, he asked me to prepare for various scenarios, including one where you might need to return here." I looked up sharply. "He suspected Robert?" Monique measured her words carefully. "Your grandfather was an excellent judge of character. He had reservations about your husband's intentions. But he respected your choice and hoped he was wrong." As I processed this, Monique continued her tour, pointing out the refrigerator stocked with prepared meals, the hospital-grade breast pump, the intercom system installed in each room. She'd thought of everything. "There's something else you should see," she said after I'd fed and settled both twins. She led me to grandfather's study, a room that had always been his sanctuary. The heavy oak door opened to reveal the space largely unchanged, leather-bound. Books lining the walls, the faint scent of pipe tobacco still lingering despite his having quit years before his death. On the massive desk sat a sealed envelope with my name written in grandfather's distinctive script. "He left specific instructions," Monique explained. "This was to be given to you when she needs to remember who she is. I believe that time is now." With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a single page of grandfather's personal, stationery, and a small key. "My dearest Dawn, if you're reading this, I am gone, and you are facing difficulties I had hoped would never come to pass. First, know this. You are a Morrison before you were ever a Baker. Morrisons are not defined by their challenges but by their response to them. You have always possessed a quiet strength that reminds me of your grandmother. Like her, you see the best in people, a beautiful quality that occasionally blinds you to those who would take advantage of your generous heart. Whatever has brought you back to the estate, remember that this is your legacy, not just in material terms, but in character and resilience. The Morrison fortune was built not on lucky gambles, but on careful observation, strategic patience, and the courage to act decisively when the moment demands. The enclosed key opens the safe behind the painting of Whitefish Lake. Inside, you'll find everything you need to reclaim what is rightfully yours and protect what matters most. All my love, grandfather. P.S. Monique knows everything. Trust her as I did. I looked up from the letter to find Monique watching me with a knowing expression. The safe? I asked. She moved to the landscape painting, a scene from our family's Montana property, and swung it away from the wall on hidden C. Hinges, revealing a sophisticated wall safe. I inserted the key, then entered my birth date at Monique's prompt. The heavy door swung open. Inside lay several folders, a portable hard drive, and a small leather-bound journal. Monique handed me the top folder. Your grandfather began collecting this information 2 years ago, when Robert first suggested combining your financial accounts. I opened it to find meticulous documentation of Robert's personal financial history, credit reports, bank statements, tax returns, dating back 5 years before I'd met him. The second folder contained surveillance reports and photographs. He had Robert investigated? I asked, shock mingling with a strange vindication. Harold Morrison didn't believe in leaving things to chance, Monique said simply, especially when it came to family. As I flipped through the pages, patterns emerged that I'd been too blinded by love to see. Robert's periodic financial windfalls that he'd attributed to successful investments. The women whose names appeared repeatedly in expense reports. The gambling debts carefully hidden then mysteriously paid off. He's done this before, I realized, the truth crystallizing with horrible clarity. Monique nodded grimly. 3 times. That we could confirm. Wealthy women, whirlwind romances, followed by mysterious financial troubles that required liquidating assets. The final page of the file contained a name that made my blood run cold. Chloe Taylor, suspected accomplice. My best friend, I whispered. Your husband's partner in more ways than one, Monique corrected gently. They've been working together for years, targeting women with significant assets. Your grandfather discovered their connection about 6 months before he died. Why didn't he tell me? He tried in his way. Remember when he suggested you keep the trust confidential until the time was right? He was giving you protection while hoping you'd see the truth for yourself. Monique's expression held no judgment. He believed forcing you to choose would only push you further into Robert's influence. I closed the folder, a cold resolve settling over me. Grandfather was preparing me for this moment. Yes, Monique agreed. And now, he's given you everything you need to fight back. Sleep eluded me that night despite my exhaustion. Between feeding the twins and processing the revelations from my grandfather's safe, my mind raced with questions. How had I missed the signs? How deeply did Robert's deception run? By morning, Monique found me in grandfather's study, the contents of his files spread across the massive desk. I'd been up since 4 a.m. after the twins' feeding, poring over the evidence with the analytical precision that had made me successful in my career. You should rest, Monique said, setting down a tray with tea and toast. I'll rest when my children's future is secure. I gestured to my organized stacks of documents. Robert's pattern is clear. He targets financially comfortable women, preferably those with greater wealth potential, inheritances, family connections, or career trajectories that promise future affluence. Monique nodded, filling my teacup. Your grandfather called it investing in futures. Chloe was instrumental in every case, I continued. She befriends the target first, gathering information about their finances, family dynamics, vulnerabilities. Then she introduces Robert at a carefully orchestrated chance meeting. The betrayal of friendship cut almost deeper than Robert's deception. Chloe had been my confidant for 3 years before introducing me to Robert at a charity gala. She'd helped me pick out my wedding dress, organized my baby shower, been the first person I'd called when the pregnancy test showed positive, all while helping Robert plan to take everything I had. The timing makes sense now, I said, tapping a particular bank statement. 6 months ago, when grandfather's health declined severely, there was a flurry of activity in Robert's private account. He must have realized the inheritance would be coming soon. And the pregnancy? Monique asked gently. I placed a protective hand over my still tender abdomen. Initially, a complication to their plan, I suspect. But then an opportunity. What? Better time to disappear with someone's money than when they're physically incapacitated and emotionally overwhelmed with newborns? A soft chime interrupted us, the house's security system announcing an arrival. Monique checked her tablet. That's Catherine, the day nurse. Before you go, I said, there's something else. I slid across a document I'd found in the deepest folder. According to this, Robert has another identity. Martin Reynolds. He's used it for previous projects. Monique's expression remained neutral, but her eyes hardened. Yes, your grandfather discovered it during the background investigation. And a third identity, too, it seems. Craig Phillips. I tapped another page. The real estate holdings under this name, paid for with money from his previous victims, I'm guessing, include a lake house in Wisconsin and a condo in Tampa. You've been thorough, Monique observed. I'm an analyst. Patterns are what I do. I gathered the papers into a neat stack. I need to see everything else. Credit card statements, phone records, email accounts. I need to know exactly how much he's taken, from me and from others. After Catherine was settled with the twins, Monique returned with her laptop and a secure phone. These are clean devices, she explained. We have to assume Robert has access to your regular accounts, possibly with tracking software. For the next 3 hours, we methodically pieced together Robert's activities over the past year. The picture that emerged was both infuriating and grimly validating. After gaining access to my regular banking passwords, likely from the family emergency contact information I'd provided during a particularly busy period at work, Robert had been systematically siphoning small amounts from my personal accounts for months. He was testing boundaries, I noted. Taking enough to build his escape fund, but not enough to trigger my attention. The real escalation began when my pregnancy was confirmed. Credit card statements showed purchases at high-end jewelers and restaurants, gifts and meals not for me, but for Chloe, hidden under vague business expense descriptions. Hotel charges in cities where Robert claimed to be attending conferences, always with an extra business dinner charge that matched Chloe's favorite champagne. There's a pattern to their movements, I observed, marking locations on a digital map. They've been preparing for this, establishing a new base somewhere. Monique zoomed in on repeated charges in Scottsdale, Arizona. This matches the property records for Craig Phillips. My phone, my regular one, buzzed with an incoming call. Robert's name flashed on the screen. Should I answer? I asked Monique, suddenly uncertain. Yes, on speaker. Remember, he doesn't. And know what you know? I took a deep breath and answered, my voice deliberately weak. Robert? Dawn. His voice held the perfect blend of concern and distraction. How are you feeling? How are the babies? We're managing, I said, fighting to keep my tone neutral. The nurses at the hospital have been helpful. When are you coming back? A pause. That's why I'm calling. There's been a situation with the Matthews account. The Singapore office needs me to fly out immediately. The Matthews account. A convenient fiction. I'd checked this morning. Robert's firm had no client by that name. Singapore? But the babies are only 4 days old. I infused my voice with a tremor. I need you here. Robert, I can't do this alone. I know, honey, and I'm sorry. But this is a career-making opportunity. We're talking a 7-figure commission. His voice lowered to a conspiratorial tone. This could set us up for years, Dawn. Think about the kids' college funds. College. Funds. As if he hadn't just emptied our savings account. The money from our joint accounts, I said carefully. Was that for your flight? Another pause, longer this time. What? Oh, that. Yes, partly. And I've been setting up some investments I've been researching. With the babies coming, we need to be more aggressive with our portfolio. I was going to surprise you when it all went through. Monique raised an eyebrow at the audacity of the lie. When will you be back? I pressed. 2 weeks, tops. Listen, I've got to run. Boarding soon. Kiss the little ones for me. Love you. The call ended before I could respond. He's buying time, Monique said, likely emptying any remaining accounts and covering his tracks. Singapore, I repeated, turning back to the map. Not Arizona. A false trail, Monique agreed. Check the credit card for international charges. Sure enough, Robert's corporate card showed a first-class ticket to Singapore, departing tomorrow, not today as he'd implied. A diversionary tactic while he finalized his actual plans. There's something else, I said, pulling up the home security app on my tablet. Another of grandfather's precautions. When I'd moved into Robert's house after marriage, he'd insisted on installing a state-of-the-art security system as a wedding gift. What I hadn't realized until reading his files was that the system included discrete cameras in common areas. I entered my access code and flipped through recent footage. There, in our living room just yesterday, Robert and Chloe, packing items, into expensive luggage. Robert moved methodically through the house, selecting valuables, the antique silver from my family, the art pieces we'd collected, even the diamond earrings he'd given me for our anniversary, retrieved from my jewelry box. He's liquidating everything, I murmured. But it was the next clip that froze my blood. Robert at my desk, going through my personal papers, pulling out the single document I'd kept about the Morrison Trust, a vague reference letter from Carl about family assets under management that I'd saved for tax purposes. Robert's expression changed as he read, a slow smile spreading across his face. He pulled out his phone and took photos of the document before carefully returning it to its place. He knows, I whispered, or at least, he suspects. This changes our timeline, Monique said briskly. If he's aware of the trust, even partially, he'll accelerate his plans. The security footage continued, Robert and Chloe embracing in my kitchen, laughing as he twirled her around. To us, he said, his voice slightly tinny through the security system audio. And to the stupid little accountant who's about to fund our early retirement. The rage that swept through me was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Cold, clarifying, and absolute. The evidence before me wasn't just of financial fraud, but of calculated emotional manipulation, the deliberate exploitation of trust given in good faith. I watched them drink champagne, my champagne, in my kitchen, while planning their escape. With my money, mocking the life I'd built and the family I'd just created. He thinks I'm still the naive woman who believed his lies, I said, my voice steady despite the anger burning through me. He has no idea who he's actually dealing with. Monique's smile held no warmth. Then perhaps it's time to show him. By afternoon, Carl arrived with Dr. Sharma, a distinguished OB/GYN who specialized in high-risk pregnancies and postpartum care. As Catherine supervised the twins' nap in the nursery, I submitted to Dr. Sharma's examination in the privacy of the main suite. Your C-section incision is healing properly, she concluded, removing her gloves. But you're pushing yourself too hard, too soon. Your body has undergone significant trauma. Carl, who had diplomatically waited in the adjoining sitting room, rejoined us as I readjusted my clothing. What are the specific limitations? He asked, legal pad ready. Dr. Sharma looked between us, her expression concerned. Mrs. Baker needs at least 2 more weeks of minimal physical activity. No lifting anything heavier than the babies. No driving for another week. Limited stairs. And most importantly, proper rest between feedings. I waved away her concerns. I have help with the twins. My priority is... Your priority must be recovery, Dr. Sharma interrupted firmly. Stress impedes healing and can affect milk production. Whatever situation you're facing, You won't be able to handle it effectively if you collapse from exhaustion or develop complications. Carl made careful notes. And cognitively? Hormonal fluctuations, sleep deprivation? How will these affect decision-making? I threw him a betrayed look, but Dr. Sharma nodded approvingly at the question. Postpartum cognitive function can be impaired, particularly with twins and the added stress Mrs. Baker is experiencing. Reduced attention span, memory lapses, and emotional volatility are common. I would recommend against making major financial or legal decisions without consulting trusted advisors. I'm perfectly capable, I began. Of course you are, Dr. Sharma said, her tone gentler. But even Olympic athletes need recovery time after performance. Your body has just completed a marathon. After providing detailed care instructions and scheduling a follow-up visit, Dr. Sharma departed, leaving Carl and me alone in the sitting room. I know you're frustrated, he said before I could speak. But we need to be realistic about your current limitations. Robert has mobility, energy, and single-minded focus. You're recovering from major surgery while caring for newborns. And that's exactly why I can't afford to wait, I countered, shifting uncomfortably as my incision throbbed. Every day gives him more opportunity to disappear with my money. Our money, Carl corrected gently. The Morrison Trust remains untouched and secure. What Robert has taken, while substantial to most people, is a fraction of your actual assets. It's not about the amount, I insisted. It's about justice, about consequences. Carl's expression softened. I understand. But you need to consider the full landscape. He opened his briefcase and withdrew several folders. I've compiled reports on our current position. You should review them before we determine next steps. The first folder contained a precise accounting of my financial status. The joint accounts, now empty. My personal accounts significantly depleted. Credit cards approaching their limits with charges I hadn't made. The house in pre-listing status with Dean Baker's real estate agency. The credit card companies have been notified of fraud, Carl assured me. Those charges will be reversed. And I've filed an emergency injunction on the house. Robert cannot legally sell it without your consent. The second folder held a preliminary assessment of my physical assets. Jewelry missing from the safe deposit box. Art and antiques removed. From the house, as confirmed by the security footage. Even my car, which Robert had apparently traded in yesterday at a luxury dealership 2 counties over. He's been thorough, I noted, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest. Yes, which suggests professional planning, not impulsive action. Carl tapped the third folder. This contains what we know about Robert's current status and limitations. I flipped it open to find surveillance photos taken just hours earlier. Robert, at a private airfield, overseeing the loading of luggage into a small jet. Chloe by his side, her arm possessively linked through his. The timestamp showed 10:17 a.m., contradicting his claim of being en route to Singapore. Where was this taken? I asked. Van Nuys Airport. Our investigator reports the flight plan was filed for Scottsdale. They landed approximately 1 hour ago, the Arizona connection confirmed. What about the Singapore ticket? Never boarded. It was a diversion, as you suspected. I studied the remaining pages. Property records for the Scottsdale address held, under the Craig Phillips identity, utility activations, recent deliveries of high-end furniture and electronics. He's setting up their new life, I murmured. Using my money to create a luxury nest. Yes, but his haste creates vulnerabilities. Carl indicated several highlighted sections. The Scottsdale property was purchased only 4 months ago. The title transfer shows irregularities that could be contested. And most significantly, he's using finances and identities we can track. The implications were both encouraging and sobering. Robert had prepared his escape, but not as thoroughly as he believed. He had resources and mobility that I currently lacked, but his confidence might lead to mistakes. What about the Morrison Trust? I asked. How vulnerable is it? given what he knows. Carl shook his head. The trust is structured with multiple layers of protection. Even with the information from that letter, he cannot access the principal. At most, he might attempt to manipulate you into making transfers once he believes you have control. Which I already do, I pointed out. Yes, but he doesn't know that. Carl's expression was grave. Your greatest vulnerability isn't financial, Dawn. It's the twins. My heart stuttered. You think he would try to use them? Not directly. Robert has shown no interest in fatherhood, but legally, he could petition for custody or visitation as leverage to extract financial concessions. The thought of Robert using Emma and Ethan as pawns made my blood run cold. He abandoned them at birth. Surely no courts prefer to maintain parental relationships when possible, Carl interrupted gently. While his actions are deplorable, abandonment for less than a week wouldn't automatically terminate parental rights. Another limitation I hadn't fully considered, my strength, my fierce love for my children, could also be exploited as a weakness. So I'm stuck here recovering while he liquidates my assets and establishes his new identity, potentially preparing to use my children as bargaining chips. The unfairness of it burned. Not exactly. Carl closed the folders with methodical precision. You have limitations, yes. But you also have resources Robert cannot imagine. On cue, Monique entered with a secure tablet. Dr. Sharma has left. Catherine reports the twins will likely sleep another hour. She noted my frustrated expression. I see Carl has covered our current challenges. Dawn needs to understand what she's facing, Carl said unapologetically. And what I can't do, I added bitterly. Monique set the tablet before me. Perhaps it's time to focus on what you can do. The screen displayed a secure messaging system I recognized from my work with financial clients. Morrison Financial's proprietary communications platform. Your grandfather maintained relationships with financial institutions worldwide, Monique explained. Banking houses, investment firms, regulatory agencies, people who owe the Morrison name favors or professional courtesies. People who can move more quickly than legal channels, Carl added, while respecting legal boundaries, of course. I looked between them, understanding dawning. You're suggesting we use grandfather's network to track and intercept Robert's activities. Among other things, Monique confirmed. Your limitations are real, Dawn. You need physical recovery and time with your children. But your mind is sharp, and your financial expertise is intact. And you have us, Carl added, along with resources Robert doesn't know exist. I thought of grandfather's letter. The Morrison fortune was built not on lucky gambles, but on careful observation, strategic patience, and the courage to act decisively when the moment demands. I need a complete picture, I decided. Every account Robert might access, every alias he's used, every connection to Chloe and their previous victims. And I need to understand exactly what legal actions are available to me. Carl nodded approvingly. I've already begun compiling the legal options. We can move on multiple fronts simultaneously. And I'll coordinate with Catherine to ensure your physical needs are met, Monique added. Your recovery is not a limitation. It's a priority that enables everything else. For the first time since discovering Robert's betrayal, I felt the fog of helplessness lifting. Yes, I was physically constrained. Yes, my energy was divided between healing and caring for newborns. But my mind was clear, my determination unshaken, and my resources far greater than Robert could possibly imagine. I might be temporarily limited, but I was far from powerless. The twins' midnight feeding coincided with a thunderstorm that rattled the estate's windows. As I nursed Ethan, watching lightning illuminate the gardens in blue-white flashes, fragments of memory began surfacing, moments that had seemed insignificant, but now revealed themselves as critical puzzle pieces. Robert's brother, I said suddenly, as Monique entered with a cup of herbal tea. She'd insisted on helping with the night shift despite Catherine's presence, claiming insomnia but revealing her dedication. "Monty?" she asked, setting down the tea within my reach. "Yes. The call Robert, made from the hospital when I was in labor. He was talking to Monty about the money transfers." I shifted Ethan to my other breast, wincing slightly. "Monty's involved somehow." Monique made a note on her ever-present tablet. "Your grandfather's files mentioned Robert's brother as a person of interest, but we couldn't establish direct involvement." "There was something else in that call," I continued, closing my eyes to better recall the overheard conversation. "Robert mentioned the Vancouver property being ready. I assumed he meant a business investment, but now—" "Another safe house," Monique concluded. "We'll investigate properties in Vancouver connected to either brother or their known aliases." As Ethan finished nursing and drifted back to sleep, another memory surfaced. "The prenuptial agreement," I said, the realization striking like the lightning outside. "The lawyer who drafted it, Jasper Willis, was recommended by Chloe, not my usual firm. Said he specialized in protecting women's assets." Monique's eyes narrowed. "That's significant. I need to see that agreement again." Willis insisted on certain clauses that seemed beneficial to me at the time. Separate property protections, financial disclosure requirements. But what if they were designed to create specific vulnerabilities? "I'll have Carl obtain a copy first thing tomorrow," Monique promised, taking Ethan to burp him. Thunder crashed outside, and Emma startled awake in her bassinet. As I soothed her, another connection clicked into place. The charity gala where I met Robert. It was for childhood literacy. But Robert has never shown interest in education initiatives since then. He even complained about our donations to similar causes. "A calculated entry point," Monique suggested. "He studied your giving patterns." "Yes, but that's not what bothers me." I frowned, trying to articulate the emerging pattern. "Robert cultivated specific friendships after we married. People with connections to financial institutions, estate, planning, even my personal banker. I thought he was just being supportive of my career." "He was mapping your financial landscape," Monique said. "And isolating me from my original network," I added. "I stopped attending industry events because Robert always had alternative engagements planned. My regular lunches with colleagues gradually disappeared from my calendar. Classic manipulation tactics. How had I missed them? By morning, these midnight insights had crystallized into actionable intelligence. Over breakfast, which Catherine insisted I eat before diving into work, I outlined my thoughts to Carl and Monique. "We've been thinking about this as financial fraud," I explained, "but it's more sophisticated. Robert didn't just target my visible assets. He systematically positioned himself to access the Morrison fortune if and when I inherited." Carl nodded. "The long game. The prenup," I continued, "which I insisted on to protect my modest inheritance from my parents, was actually designed to create a pathway to bigger assets. There's a clause about jointly managed family interests that could be interpreted to include trust distributions." "Clever," Carl admitted. "Not legally sound, but enough to initiate costly litigation." "And then there's Monty." I passed Carl the notes I'd made during the night. "Robert's brother is a digital security consultant. Last Thanksgiving, he upgraded our home network as a gift. I gave him administrator access to everything." Monique's expression darkened. "Including your devices and security systems. Which means," I concluded, "we have to assume they still have access to my regular email, banking passwords, and possibly the home security footage." "Their surveillance gives us an opportunity," Carl noted. "If they believe they're monitoring your activities successfully, we can feed them specific information." This sparked another realization. The hospital records, too. Robert could access my patient portal with the password he knows. He's likely monitoring my expected discharge date, medical status, everything. "So he knows you've been released," Carl concluded. "But not where I've gone," I countered. The Morrison estate isn't in any records linked to my married name. Even the car that brought me here was registered to the family corporation. Monique tapped her tablet thoughtfully. We could use the hospital angle. Have them update your records to show complications requiring extended recovery. Buying us time, I agreed. As if summoned by our discussion of medical matters, Dr. Sharma arrived for my morning checkup. After examining my incision and vital signs, she delivered an assessment that tied directly to our strategic planning. You're healing well physically, she confirmed, but your blood pressure is elevated. Not dangerously, but enough to concern me given your circumstances. Stress, I acknowledged. Yes, and it can impede recovery. Medically speaking, I would recommend minimizing stressors for at least another week. Focus on bonding with your babies and allowing your body to heal. After she left, Carl looked at me expectantly. Does this change our approach? No, I decided. But it clarifies our timeline. I can't afford a prolonged battle right now, not physically or emotionally. We need decisive action that resolves this quickly. Monique's tablet chimed with an incoming message. She reviewed it, her expression shifting to one of grim satisfaction. Our financial inquiries have yielded results, she announced. Robert attempted to open accounts at Swiss United Bank this morning, using your joint tax returns as proof of assets. That's standard procedure for establishing banking relationships, I noted. Yes, but he claimed to be representing Morrison Financial interests. Used your grandfather's company letterhead, presumably from documents in your home office. My grandfather's letterhead, which contained embedded security features invisible to the naked eye but recognized by major financial institutions. A protection against exactly this kind of fraud. So he triggered security protocols, I realized. Immediately, Monique confirmed. The bank contacted Morrison Financial directly, following established verification procedures. Our compliance officer recognized the situation from the alert I issued yesterday. What happened? I asked. The bank stalled him, claiming additional documentation requirements. He's scheduled to return tomorrow morning with certified financial statements. A crucial mistake on Robert's part, attempting to leverage the Morrison name without understanding the safeguards in place. My grandfather had built relationships with banking institutions worldwide, establishing protocols that would flag unauthorized use of company credentials. This gives us leverage, Carl noted. Banking fraud carries significant penalties, especially across international boundaries. But I was already seeing beyond the immediate advantage. It's not just leverage, it's a pattern revealing Robert's larger strategy. I turned to Monique. Can we get the exact documents he presented? And surveillance footage from the bank? Already requested. And we need to check other financial centers where Morrison has relationships. If he tried this at one institution, he's likely approaching multiple banks, Carl finished, creating a diverse portfolio of fraudulent accounts. This insight unlocked another memory, a conversation I'd overheard between Robert and Chloe at our Christmas party, thinking they were discussing legitimate investment strategy. Diversification is key. Establish 5 entry points, then funnel through the Caribbean shell before consolidation. Not investment advice. Instructions for laundering money. The Caribbean shell, I said aloud. They mentioned a structure in the Cayman Islands. If we can identify it, we can potentially freeze all connected accounts, Carl concluded. As Monique made calls to initiate these inquiries, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The fragments were aligning, the pattern emerging with clarity that only my analytical mind could fully appreciate. Robert and Chloe had been meticulous in their planning, but they'd made the critical error of underestimating both me and the legacy I carried. They saw only the surface. A new mother, physically vulnerable, emotionally overwhelmed. They didn't recognize the Morrison beneath the baker. They didn't understand that while my body recovered, my mind was making connections they had never anticipated. Most crucially, they didn't realize that the very network they sought to exploit was already mobilizing against them, invisible threads of influence and information tightening around their scheme before they even sensed the resistance. "We have them," I said softly, the certainty growing with each new insight. "They just don't know it yet." By afternoon, the Morrison estate's former sunroom had transformed into our command center. Carl had arranged for a secure data terminal to be installed, connected to Morrison Financial's private servers, but isolated from any networks Robert might monitor. Monique coordinated a steady stream of information from financial institutions and private investigators, while I directed our efforts from a comfortable chaise, twins sleeping nearby. "Documentation is our strongest weapon," Carl emphasized, organizing evidence into categories. Criminal charges, civil litigation, financial recovery, each requires specific proof. I nodded, reviewing the growing case file. "We need to establish clear timelines and patterns of behavior. Not just what Robert took, but how systematically he operated." On the digital whiteboard, we mapped every known action Robert had taken, from our first meeting to his most recent Swiss bank maneuver. Color-coded threads connected seemingly disparate events into a cohesive strategy. Red for financial transactions, blue for identity creation and documentation, green for relationship manipulation. "His pattern becomes clear when visualized," I noted, studying the timeline. Each relationship phase corresponded with specific financial actions. Courtship coincided with information gathering, engagement with isolation from my support network, marriage with gradual asset integration, and pregnancy with acceleration. "Toward exit," Monique concluded. I turned to the financial documentation, where my professional expertise proved most valuable. Bank statements revealed methodical withdrawals disguised as legitimate expenses. Credit card records showed purchases, supporting his alternate identities, clothing never worn in my presence, travel to locations he'd never mentioned visiting. He maintained separate digital devices, I realized, noting patterns in our internet billing. Regular data spikes occurred when I was reliably away. Yoga classes, prenatal appointments. Carl flagged each discovery for further investigation. Electronic evidence can be particularly compelling in court. By evening, we had constructed 3 distinct but interconnected cases against Robert. First, criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny, supported by bank records, forged documents, and security footage from our home. Second, civil claims for financial damages, emotional distress, and breach of fiduciary duty, strengthened by evidence of his deliberate deception throughout our relationship. Third, a comprehensive strategy for financial recovery that would not only reclaim what he'd taken but potentially seize assets acquired through his previous schemes. "What about Chloe and Monty?" I asked. "They're equally culpable." "We're building separate cases against each," Carl confirmed. "Conspiracy charges at minimum. For Chloe, there's also potential fraud related to her professional interactions with you." The documentation process proved unexpectedly therapeutic. Each piece of evidence transformed my personal betrayal into something objective, a case to be pursued rather than a wound to be nursed. The analyst in me found satisfaction in assembling this puzzle, even as the woman and mother in me still reeled from the deception. As we worked, patterns emerged beyond Robert's actions. Banking alerts from Morrison Financial's network identified similar fraud attempts at institutions in Singapore, London, and Toronto, all using variations of my credentials or family connections. "He's casting a wide net," I observed, hoping something sticks before the fraud is detected. "And documenting his attempts gives us leverage with international authorities," Carl added. "Financial crimes across multiple jurisdictions elevate the priority level for law enforcement." Monique received confirmation that Swiss United Bank had preserved surveillance footage of Robert's visit. The images showed him confidently presenting forged documentation, Chloe waiting outside in a rented luxury car. "He's using my grandfather's name," I noted, anger flaring at the falsified Morrison financial letterhead. "A name built on decades of integrity." "Which gives us another angle," Carl said. "Trademark infringement, corporate identity theft. The business damages exceed personal theft." By nightfall, our evidence compilation had yielded unexpected insights into Robert's capabilities and limitations. His technical knowledge was primarily borrowed from Monty. His financial transactions followed predictable patterns. His confidence led him to take shortcuts that created vulnerabilities. Most significantly, he consistently underestimated institutional safeguards, believing his charm and surface-level knowledge sufficient to bypass security measures designed by experts like my grandfather. "He's not nearly as clever as he thinks," I concluded, reviewing his clumsy attempts to leverage Morrison credentials. "His success relies on targeting women during vulnerable periods and exploiting emotional manipulation, not actual financial expertise, which makes your analytical abilities his blind spot," Monique observed. As I prepared for the twins' evening feeding, I reviewed what we'd assembled, a comprehensive case file that transformed scattered evidence into a compelling narrative of calculated fraud. Each document, statement, and timestamp added weight to our position. Each connection strengthened the foundation for what would come next. "We have enough to begin legal proceedings," Carl confirmed. "But timing remains critical." I nodded, understanding the delicate balance we faced. Move too quickly, and Robert might vanish with whatever assets we hadn't yet traced. Wait too long, and he could establish new identities beyond our reach. "Tomorrow," I decided. "We'll make our first move tomorrow." For the first time since discovering Robert's betrayal, I felt the power shifting. No longer just a victim of his scheme, I had become the architect of his reckoning. Dawn broke just as I finished nursing the twins. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. A new day, a new phase in our strategy. I'd managed a few hours of sleep, more than I'd expected given the weight of what we were undertaking. Carl arrived earlier than scheduled, his expression unusually grave. He carried a secure tablet rather than his usual portfolio. "There's been a development," he said without preamble. "Our investigator found something in Vancouver. The property Robert had mentioned to Monty during my labor." I braced myself. "Show me." The tablet displayed property records for a waterfront condominium purchased 6 months ago, precisely when my grandfather's health had begun its final decline. The owner, Phoenix Holdings, LLC, a shell company registered in Delaware. "This is Robert's?" I asked, indirectly. Phoenix Holdings traces back to a trust controlled by Dean Baker, Robert's cousin, the realtor. The pieces connected instantly. "He's been helping launder the money through real estate transactions." Carl nodded. "But that's not the most disturbing discovery." He swiped to the next document, a birth certificate dated 9 years earlier. "The Vancouver property has another regular occupant." A child's name jumped from the page. Aiden Phillips. Mother, Margaret Phillips, deceased. Father, Craig Phillips. "Craig Phillips, Robert's alias," I whispered, the implications hitting me like a physical blow. "Robert has a son, a 9-year-old son, who has been attending private school in Vancouver for the past 3 years, according to enrollment records. Tuition paid by Phoenix Holdings." My mind raced through calculations I didn't want to face. 9 years ago, Robert would have been 25. I'd known him for only 5 years, married for 3. "Does the timeline match any of his previous targets?" I managed to ask. Carl's expression confirmed my suspicion before he spoke. Margaret Phillips, born Margaret Wilson, was a client at his former investment firm. Wealthy family, inherited significant assets at 21. She died in a boating accident 7 years ago. "Accident?" I questioned, already knowing the answer. Investigation was inconclusive. No charges filed. Her family raised questions but couldn't prove anything. Shortly after, Craig Phillips disappeared, with their son. Carl hesitated before continuing. According to our investigator, Aiden has been told his father travels for business. He stays with a nanny when Robert is away. A child. An innocent child caught in Robert's web of deception. The revelation transformed everything. Not just my understanding of Robert's capacity for betrayal, but the scope of his crimes and callousness. He was never going to Singapore, I realized. Or Arizona. The Scottsdale property was another misdirection. We believe so. His actual destination appears to be Vancouver, where he's been methodically transferring assets over the past 6 months. My thoughts turned to the twins, not yet 2 weeks old. He abandoned our children without a second thought, but has been supporting his son for years. In his own way, Carl said carefully. The nanny reports that Robert visits monthly at most. The relationship appears to be perfunctory, transactional, like everything in Robert's life. Even parenthood. Monique entered, immediately sensing the atmosphere. What's happened? As Carl briefed her, I struggled to process this new dimension of betrayal. The existence of Aiden didn't just reveal Robert's longer history of deception. It exposed the calculated nature of his relationship with me. I hadn't been chosen for compatibility or love, but for financial potential after his previous scheme. We need to modify our approach, I said finally. The criminal case just became more complex. If Robert defrauded Margaret Phillips before her death, it could elevate the investigation to include questions about her accident, Carl confirmed. And there's Aiden to consider, I added. An innocent child who deserves protection. Monique studied the property records thoughtfully. This may actually strengthen our position. Robert can't disappear completely while maintaining his relationship with his son. A vulnerability in his planning, I agreed. He's created an anchor he can't easily abandon. Carl made notes on his tablet. I'll update our filing to include this information, and I'll contact Canadian authorities regarding potential international fraud charges. As they discussed legal implications, I found myself drawn to the photo of Aiden included in the school records. A solemn-faced boy with Robert's distinctive eyes, but none of his practiced charm. A child who'd lost his mother under suspicious circumstances and lived with Robert's intermittent presence as his only parental figure. We need to ensure Aiden is protected when this all comes to light, I insisted. Whatever Robert has done, his son shouldn't suffer for it. Of course, Carl assured me. We'll request appropriate intervention from family services. The discovery of Robert's son added moral complexity to our pursuit of justice. No longer was this simply about recovering stolen assets or punishing betrayal. A child's welfare had entered the equation, a child who might soon learn devastating truths about his father. There's something else, Monique said, reviewing additional files on her tablet. Financial records from Phoenix Holdings show regular payments to a medical facility in Toronto. Specialized care for someone named Eleanor Phillips. Another family. Member? I asked. Margaret's mother. Aiden's grandmother. She has advanced Parkinson's disease. Robert appears to be covering her care costs. This detail didn't align with my understanding of Robert's character. He's paying for his former mother-in-law's medical treatment? Why would he? Control, Carl suggested. Or perhaps insurance. If Eleanor knows something about her daughter's death, keeping her comfortable ensures her silence, Monique finished. The depths of Robert's manipulation extended further than I'd imagined possible. Not just financial fraud or marital betrayal, but potentially something far darker. Something that crossed into territory I hadn't wanted to contemplate. We need to move faster than planned, I decided, a new urgency driving me. Robert isn't just a con man. He's dangerous in ways we're only beginning to understand. Carl nodded grimly. I'll make the calls now. As he stepped out to initiate our legal proceedings, I looked down at Emma and Ethan sleeping peacefully in their bassinets. They were safe. They would remain safe. but somewhere in Vancouver, another child remained in the orbit of a man whose moral boundaries seemed to disappear further with each revelation. Justice was no longer just about my betrayal. It had become about protection for my children, for Aiden, and potentially for others I didn't yet know about. The discovery of Aiden and the suspicious circumstances surrounding Margaret Phillips's death demanded a complete recalibration of our strategy. Within the hour, Carl had assembled a virtual meeting with key allies, a former FBI financial crimes specialist now in private practice, a prosecutor who specialized in cross-border fraud cases, and Lisa, my friend who had first alerted me to Robert and Chloe's relationship. "We need a multi-pronged approach," I stated, addressing the secure video conference from my position on the study's couch. "The financial recovery remains important, but protecting Aiden and establishing the full scope of Robert's crimes takes precedence." The former FBI agent, Martin Reeves, nodded his agreement. "Based on what you've shared, we're looking at potential charges spanning at least 3 jurisdictions: financial fraud here, banking violations in Switzerland, and possible criminal investigation in Canada regarding Margaret Phillips. Our strongest leverage is speed and surprise," added Sandra Jenkins, the prosecutor. "Baker believes he has at least several weeks before you're physically recovered enough to discover his actions. That overconfidence creates an opening." Lisa, who had taken a red-eye flight to join us in person, provided crucial context. "Robert's relationship with Chloe isn't just about this scheme. They've been working together for years. I've been digging through social media archives, and I found photos placing them together as far back as 8 years ago, always in the background, always careful, but definitely together." "Before Margaret's accident," I noted. "Long before," Lisa confirmed grimly. I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. Financial analysis had always been my strength, identifying patterns, developing strategies, calculating optimal approaches. Now I needed to apply those skills to something far more personal and urgent. "Here's what we know about Robert's current position," I began, shifting into my professional analysis mode. "He's moving between Scottsdale and Vancouver, establishing financial footholds in both locations plus foreign accounts. He believes I'm still hospitalized, or at least incapacitated by recovery and childcare. Most importantly, he thinks his activities are undetected because he controls our shared digital environment. The surveillance advantage," Reeves commented. "Which we can leverage," I continued. "I propose a 3-phase strategy operating simultaneously." I outlined my plan, drawing on each team member's expertise. Phase 1 would focus on asset protection and recovery, freezing accounts, filing emergency injunctions, and documenting fraud through official channels. Phase 2 would address the criminal investigation, building cases methodically while coordinating with authorities in multiple jurisdictions. Phase 3, the most delicate, would involve Aiden and the Vancouver situation. "I want to be clear," I emphasized. "Whatever happens, Aiden must be protected. He's an innocent child who's already lost his mother." "Child Protective Services will need to be involved," Sandra noted. "But carefully, we don't want to tip off Robert before we're ready." We spent the next 2 hours refining the strategy, assigning responsibilities, and establishing secure communication protocols. By lunch, each team member had clear objectives and timelines. "What about your personal safety?" Lisa asked as the virtual participants signed off. "If Robert realizes you're building a case against him..." "The Morrison estate is secure," Monique assured her. "Limited access points, modern security system, remote location, and we have private security personnel on rotating shifts." I appreciated their concern, but my mind had already moved to the next critical decision. We need to establish what Robert can see through our digital footprint. What trail should we create to maintain his false sense of security? Carl nodded, approvingly. Misdirection while we position our resources. Exactly. I turned to Monique. Can we ensure the hospital records show I'm still there? Dealing with recovery complications? Already arranged. According to official records, you're battling a post-surgical infection requiring extended hospitalization. And my regular email and phone? We've set up automated responses and limited activity that suggests you're focused entirely on medical concerns and the twins. I considered our position carefully. My financial training had taught me that timing was often the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Move too early with insufficient preparation, and Robert would simply disappear with whatever assets he'd already secured. Wait too long, and he might harm others or establish himself beyond our reach. We need a triggering event, I decided. Something that will make Robert act predictably while revealing his vulnerabilities. Lisa leaned forward. What kind of trigger? Money, I said simply. Robert's primary motivation has always been financial. His actions with Margaret, with me, even his limited engagement with Aiden, all fundamentally transactional. Carl caught my direction immediately. We make him believe there's a significant sum suddenly within reach. Precisely. A portion of the Morrison Trust appearing to become accessible due to some administrative development. I turned to Monique. Can we create a legitimate-looking notification about a trust distribution that would reach Robert through channels he monitors? A phantom distribution, Monique mused. Yes, we could have the notification sent to your regular email, which we know he's accessing. Make it appear that a significant sum is being prepared for transfer to accounts you control. He won't be able to resist, Lisa agreed. It's exactly the opportunity he's been positioning himself for. But we control exactly what he sees and when, I added. We can include specific account information that we're monitoring, creating, a trail that leads exactly where we want him to go. As we refined this approach, I felt my analytical mind fully engaging with the challenge. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was a complex financial and legal chess match where anticipating Robert's moves allowed us to position our counter-moves with precision. What about Chloe? Lisa asked. She's equally involved. The same. Trigger will work for both, I explained. Where Robert goes, Chloe follows. Their partnership appears to be both professional and personal. By evening, our strategy had crystallized into a detailed action plan with contingencies for various scenarios. Each team member understood their role in the carefully choreographed sequence that would unfold over the next 72 hours. It won't be simple, Carl cautioned. Robert has proven himself adaptable and calculating. Yes, I agreed. But he has weaknesses too. His arrogance, his underestimation of women, and most importantly, his belief that I'm still the trusting, naive person he married. I looked down at the twins, sleeping peacefully nearby, unaware of the complex operation forming around them. For them, for Aiden, and for myself, I would ensure that Robert faced the consequences of his actions, methodically, legally, and with the precision that had defined my professional life. Tomorrow morning, I decided, we begin at dawn. While Robert believed I remained helplessly confined to a hospital bed, the next 48 hours witnessed a flurry of carefully concealed activity. Each move was calculated to remain invisible to his monitoring while positioning our countermeasures. The Phantom Trust notification was crafted with meticulous attention to detail. Morrison financial letterhead, proper legal terminology, and the signature of a trust officer Robert had researched but never met. It referenced a $3.7 million distribution scheduled for release in 3 days, pending final administrative approval. The amount was substantial enough to trigger Robert's greed, but not so extravagant as to raise his suspicion. He's accessed the email, Monique confirmed, monitoring the tracking software we'd embedded in the message. Spent approximately 7 minutes reviewing the document, and now he'll research the details to verify authenticity, I predicted. Everything must hold up to his scrutiny. Carl had ensured that superficial investigation would confirm our fabricated narrative. The trust officer existed. The distribution, schedule aligned with standard protocols. The verification procedures matched Morrison Financial's published policies. While Robert focused on this tantalizing prospect, our team executed the substantive work beneath the surface. Legal filings were prepared under seal, preventing public records from alerting him. Financial holds were positioned but not activated, ready to freeze assets across multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. In Vancouver, a carefully vetted social worker conducted an educational wellness check at Aiden's school, standard procedure that wouldn't raise alarms but would establish a baseline assessment of his situation. The social worker reports Aiden appears well cared for physically, Lisa informed me after receiving the confidential update, but noted as emotionally reserved and excessively self-reliant for his age. The description tightened something in my chest. Has she established contact with the nanny? Initial conversation only. Angela Porter, 56, employed through an agency for the past 3 years. Professional, protective of Aiden. Seems unaware of Robert's broader activities. Meanwhile, Catherine continued providing excellent care for the twins, allowing me precious hours to direct our operation despite my still recovering body. Dr. Sharma had reluctantly approved my increased activity level, provided I maintained strict rest periods and limited physical exertion. Your incision is healing well, she noted during her checkup, but your body is still recovering from major surgery while producing milk for 2 babies. There are physiological limits even determination can't overcome. I acknowledged her concern while privately calculating how to maximize my effective working hours. Emma and Ethan needed me, but so did this operation, and possibly Aiden too, though he didn't know it yet. By the second evening, Robert took his first predictable step. He attempted to contact my banker, actually a Morrison Financial employee briefed on our operation to discuss family financial planning in light of recent developments. He's requesting a video conference tomorrow morning, Monique reported. Claimed to be acting as your financial advisor with your authorization. Perfect, I said. We'll provide just enough information to guide his next move. That night, as I nursed the twins in the quiet darkness, I felt a strange duality, physically still in the vulnerable state of early motherhood, while mentally orchestrating a complex financial and legal operation. The contrast wasn't lost on me. While Robert believed me incapacitated by the very children he'd abandoned, those quiet hours with Emma and Ethan had become my time for clearest thinking. Robert had no idea that with each passing hour, the net around him tightened, invisible threads of legal, financial, and personal accountability drawing inexorably closer while he chased the phantom millions we'd dangled before him. Dawn was breaking as I finalized preparations for Robert's video call with our planted Morrison Financial Advisor. The irony wasn't lost on me. While he believed he was manipulating my financial team, he would actually be revealing crucial information to my allies. Jenny's here, Monique announced, escorting my former hospital nurse into the study. I looked up in surprise. Jenny? I didn't realize you were part of today's operations. Jenny smiled, setting down her nursing bag. When Monique explained what was happening, I volunteered. That man doesn't deserve to get away with abandoning you and these beautiful babies. Her presence represented something I hadn't anticipated, the growing circle of support forming around me. What had begun as a small team of professional advisors had organically expanded to include people connected by moral conviction rather than financial or legal obligation. We need someone to monitor your actual medical status during this operation, Monique explained. Dr. Sharma recommended Jenny specifically. As Jenny checked my vitals and incision, Lisa arrived with breakfast and news. Chloe's credit card was just used to purchase 2 first-class tickets to Vancouver. Departure tomorrow morning. They're accelerating their timeline, I noted. The Phantom Trust distribution is working. Carl joined us via secure video link from his downtown office. The legal team is assembled. Judge Winters has agreed to review our emergency filings today. She has a particular interest in cases involving financial exploitation of new mothers. Another ally I hadn't expected. The coalition building around our cause extended beyond those in the room. The banking consortium is prepared as well, Monique added. Representatives from 6 financial institutions have agreed to coordinate their actions precisely as we requested. These institutions, with their rigid protocols and bureaucratic caution, had proven surprisingly responsive when presented with evidence of Robert's schemes. My grandfather's reputation opened doors, but the merits of our case secured cooperation. By mid-morning, our expanded team included financial forensic specialists, legal experts across 3 jurisdictions, banking security officers, and even a child welfare advocate specializing in cases involving parental financial crimes. Robert's video call is scheduled for 11, Monique reminded me. Are you certain you don't want to observe? I shook my head. No. Better that I focus on coordinating the responses after we see which direction he takes. The call itself went exactly as predicted. Robert, believing himself to be speaking with a Morrison financial representative, pressed for details about the trust distribution while presenting himself as my authorized financial manager. He asked specific questions about transfer procedures, verification requirements, and timing, each answer carefully crafted to guide him toward our prepared trap. He took the bait, Martin Reeves confirmed after reviewing the recorded call. He's planning to access the distribution through the Swiss account he established using your credentials, which gives us jurisdiction for banking fraud in Switzerland, Sandra Jenkins added. That's crucial for the international recovery efforts. As noon approached, Lisa updated our monitoring of Chloe's activities. She's liquidating personal assets and canceling standing appointments for the next month. Classic preparation for disappearance. And Monty? I asked. Covering digital tracks. He's deleting accounts, scrubbing browser histories, and establishing new secure communications channels. Each report confirmed our strategy was working. Robert, Chloe, and Monty believed themselves to be operating undetected, preparing for their final extraction of my supposed wealth. Their activities created a perfect record of consciousness of guilt, evidence that would prove crucial in both criminal and civil proceedings. More importantly, their predictable responses revealed their next moves before they made them, allowing our coalition to position countermeasures with precision. Vancouver authorities have been briefed regarding Aiden, Carl reported. Child Protective Services has a team on standby, ready to intervene with appropriate sensitivity. By evening, our coalition had grown from 3 people in my grandfather's study to over 20 professionals across multiple countries, each bringing specialized expertise to our coordinated response. It's remarkable, Lisa observed as we reviewed the day's developments. How quickly people rallied to this cause. What she didn't say, what none of them said, was that the coalition had formed around me, not just my case. Something in my transformation from victim to strategist had inspired others to contribute their best efforts. As I nursed the twins before bed, I reflected on this unexpected development. Robert had seen me as nothing more than a means to financial gain. In trying to destroy me, he had instead revealed my capacity to build something far stronger than he could imagine. A coalition united by purpose and principle rather than greed. We found them, Martin Reeves announced, entering the study with a tablet displaying a complex financial diagram. All of them. It was early morning, the day before Robert and Chloe's scheduled flight to Vancouver. The twins slept peacefully nearby, as our team gathered to review the latest developments. All of whom? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The previous victims. Martin placed the tablet before me. Once we established Robert and Chloe's pattern, we cross-referenced financial records with their known locations over the past decade. 7 women in total, including Margaret Phillips and yourself. 7 lives disrupted. 7 women targeted for their assets rather than their hearts. The diagram mapped financial flows from each victim to shell companies, offshore accounts, and ultimately to Robert's various identities. The pattern is consistent, Martin continued. Chloe identifies and befriends the target. Robert initiates romantic pursuit. Relationship accelerates unusually quickly to marriage or cohabitation. Financial integration follows. Then, at a moment of vulnerability, illness, pregnancy, family crisis, extraction occurs. Lisa, who had been examining the data, looked up sharply. These amounts, collectively, they've stolen nearly $11 million over 9 years. The scale of the operation stunned me. Not just an opportunistic betrayal, but a calculated criminal enterprise sustained over nearly a decade. What happened to the other women? I asked, dreading the answer. Carl consulted his notes. 4 suffered significant financial losses but have rebuilt their lives. 1 died shortly after. Heart attack, apparently natural causes, though the timing raises questions. And Margaret Phillips. The boating accident, I finished. Yes. Only Margaret and possibly the heart attack victim raise concerns about physical harm. The others faced financial devastation but not physical danger. This revelation shifted my understanding of what we were confronting. No longer just my personal justice, our actions now represented accountability for a pattern of predatory behavior that had affected multiple lives and possibly ended 2. Have you contacted the surviving victims? I asked. Carefully, Carl confirmed. They've provided additional documentation and agreed to testify if needed. All expressed profound relief that Robert and Chloe might finally face consequences. As we processed this expanded context, another revelation emerged from the financial forensics team. The money trail from Robert and Chloe's previous schemes converged at an investment portfolio registered to a trust in Bermuda, the apparent repository for their accumulated wealth. Approximately $8.5 million remains in these accounts, Martin explained. The rest was spent on luxury properties, vehicles, travel, and maintaining their various identities. Including Aiden's care, I noted, still troubled by Robert's contradictory behavior, abandoning my newborns while supporting his son in Vancouver. Yes, though those expenses are relatively modest compared to their lifestyle spending, Martin confirmed. The implications were clear. This wasn't just about recovering my stolen savings. We had uncovered a sophisticated criminal operation that had victimized multiple women and constructed an elaborate financial architecture to hide ill-gotten gains. This changes our approach, I decided. We need to expand the asset recovery to include restitution for all victims. Carl nodded thoughtfully. It strengthens our case with authorities. Pattern crimes receive priority attention. And morally, it's the right thing to do. Lisa added. The scale of Robert's crimes had transformed my personal pursuit of justice into something larger, a responsibility to address systemic exploitation and protect potential future victims. My grandfather's words from his letter resonated anew. This is your legacy, not just in material terms, but in character and resilience. Coordinate with the other victims, I instructed Carl. Ensure they understand they're not alone, that there's a coalition working toward resolution. As our team dispersed to implement this expanded vision, I gazed down at Emma and Ethan. My fight for justice had evolved beyond personal recovery or even revenge. It had become about accountability for a pattern of predation, about healing for multiple families, about ensuring that Robert, Chloe, and their network faced consequences proportional to the harm they had caused. The revelation of scale had clarified my purpose. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a responsibility to address a wrong that extended far beyond my personal experience. The morning of execution dawned clear and crisp. According to our surveillance, Robert and Chloe were scheduled to depart for Vancouver in 3 hours. Monty was already there, preparing their digital infrastructure. Their confidence remained absolute. Not a single precautionary measure suggested they suspected our awareness of their plans. All teams in position, Martin confirmed, coordinating from a makeshift command center in grandfather's dining room. Financial institutions standing by, law enforcement briefed in 3 jurisdictions, Child Protective Services ready in Vancouver. I nodded, calm despite the enormity of what we were about to unleash. The twins had just finished their morning, feeding, and I'd handed them to Catherine for their bath, a small ritual of normalcy before we upended multiple lives. Commence Phase 1, I instructed. With those words, the first coordinated actions deployed across 3 countries simultaneously. In Switzerland, banking authorities froze the accounts Robert had established using forged Morrison credentials, triggering automatic notifications to his phone. In Bermuda, financial regulators placed a hold on the trust containing the accumulated proceeds from his years of fraud, citing international money laundering concerns. In the Cayman Islands, similar actions locked down the shell companies he'd established to funnel funds internationally. Domestically, the injunction against our home's sale was formally filed and recorded, with copies delivered to both Robert's cousin Dean and the real estate firm. Phase 1 complete, Monique reported, monitoring the cascade of digital confirmations. All financial channels secured. Robert's response came within minutes, a flurry of calls to financial institutions, each met with the same response. Accounts. Frozen pending investigation of potential fraud. He's panicking, Lisa observed, tracking his phone activity. 5 calls in 3 minutes. Now for Phase 2, I said, checking the time. Carl nodded and initiated the second wave of our response. Criminal complaints were simultaneously filed in 3 jurisdictions, triggering formal investigations with Robert, Chloe, and Monty named as persons of interest. The evidence packages we'd prepared were delivered to federal authorities, complete with financial records, witness statements from previous victims, and documentation of current activities. Most crucially, an Interpol financial crimes alert was activated, flagging their passports and identities, both real and aliases, in international travel systems. Law enforcement is moving to their location now, Martin reported, listening to updates through his earpiece. They should intercept before departure. As these external actions unfolded, I executed our personal counterstrike. From a secure laptop, I sent Robert a single message to the email account he thought I couldn't access. Robert, while you were planning your escape with Chloe, I was planning your accountability. By now you've discovered your accounts are frozen and authorities are approaching. This isn't just about what you took from me. It's about Margaret Phillips and Teresa Henderson and all the others whose lives you've damaged. The Morrison fortune you coveted is now funding your prosecution. Every fake identity, every shell company, every transaction has been documented and shared with authorities. As for our children, the twins you abandoned without a thought, they will know only that their mother protected them from someone who would have brought them harm. And Aiden deserves better than a father who uses him as part of a cover story. Dawn attachment. A single photo of me, fully recovered, sitting in my grandfather's study with all the evidence surrounding me. Message delivered, I confirmed. Let's see how he responds. We didn't have to wait long. Security cameras at their hotel captured Robert and Chloe's frantic exodus to the parking garage, luggage abandoned in their suite. They had chosen flight over confrontation, exactly as we'd predicted. They're heading south on Interstate 10, Martin reported, tracking their phone signals. Law enforcement has been updated. Within 20 minutes, the situation resolved exactly as our strategy had anticipated. Robert and Chloe, attempting to flee to Mexico, were intercepted at a highway checkpoint specifically reinforced for our operation. Their arrest, initially for financial crimes, would soon expand to include additional charges as evidence continued flowing to prosecutors. In Vancouver, Child Protective Services arrived at Aiden's school with appropriate support resources. The boy would be temporarily placed with his maternal aunt, Margaret's sister, who had been searching for him since her sister's death. Monty, attempting to delete evidence from a Vancouver hotel room, found himself interrupted by Canadian authorities with a search warrant for electronic devices related to international fraud, It's done, Carl said quietly as the confirmations streamed in. All primary targets in custody. The machinery of justice, once engaged, continued its inexorable progress. Across 3 countries, evidence was being secured, charges formalized, and legal proceedings initiated. The financial architecture Robert had constructed over years was being systematically dismantled, with assets frozen pending formal forfeiture. I felt no triumph, only a profound sense of closure. The man who had seen me as nothing but a financial resource had been undone by the very strengths he'd dismissed. My analytical mind, my professional network, and the legacy of integrity my grandfather had built. The other victims have been notified, Lisa reported. They all expressed, well, gratitude doesn't quite capture it. Justice, I suggested. They've received justice. As the command center began to wind down operations, I returned to the nursery where Emma and Ethan lay sleeping, blissfully unaware of the morning's events. I had protected them from a legacy of deception. I had honored my grandfather's faith in me. And I had transformed violation into vindication, not just for myself, but for all those whose trust Robert had betrayed. 3 weeks after Robert's arrest, I sat in a federal courthouse conference room, preparing to give my official statement to prosecutors. The twins, now 6 weeks old, remained at the estate with Catherine. Despite making remarkable progress in my recovery, I still moved carefully, the physical reminders of childbirth lingering even as the emotional wounds began to heal. Carl sat beside me, reviewing documents while we waited for the federal prosecutor to arrive. The evidence is overwhelming, he noted. Their legal teams have already approached us about potential plea agreements. All 3 of them? I asked. Monty turned first, offering evidence against Robert and Chloe in exchange for reduced charges. Then Chloe began negotiating, claiming Robert was the mastermind. Carl's expression held professional detachment mixed with personal satisfaction. They've turned on each other exactly as we predicted. The prosecutor, a formidable woman named Rebecca Winters, entered with a stack of files. Mrs. Baker, or do you prefer Ms. Morrison now? Dawn is fine, I replied, having not yet decided about returning to my maiden name. Well, Dawn, I wanted to update you before taking your formal statement. The case has expanded significantly. She laid out photographs of evidence seized from Robert's various properties. Financial records dating back 12 years, notes on potential targets, including detailed financial assessments, and most disturbing, documentation relating to Margaret, Philip's boating accident. My breath caught. He was responsible? We've reopened the investigation. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. Insurance policies, timing of financial transfers, technical issues with the boat that appear deliberate rather than accidental. The implications settled heavily in the room. Robert hadn't just been a con man. He might be implicated in manslaughter or worse. What about Aiden? I asked. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. He's adjusting well with his aunt. The judge granted temporary custody yesterday, with supervised visitation, for his grandmother once she's well enough to travel, and the financial recovery. That's actually our best news, she acknowledged. The Bermuda Trust has been fully frozen, with forfeiture proceedings initiated. The court has authorized an unusual arrangement, a restitution fund for all identified victims, with proportional distribution based on documented losses. Carl added, which means you and the other women will likely recover substantial portions of what was taken, not immediately, but eventually. The process would be lengthy, international. Financial recovery always was, but the machinery of legal consequences was now fully engaged. Robert, Chloe, and Monty faced indictments in multiple jurisdictions, with charges ranging from wire fraud to money laundering to potential involvement in Margaret's death. As I provided my formal statement that afternoon, detailing the events, from my first meeting with Chloe through Robert's arrest, I felt an unexpected sense of detachment. The woman in that story, the one who had trusted so completely, who had missed the warning signs, who had awakened in a hospital to discover betrayal, seemed like someone I had once known rather than myself. The preliminary hearing a week later brought my first direct confrontation with Robert since his arrest. Entering the courtroom, I felt a momentary flutter of anxiety, but it dissipated when I actually saw him. In jail attire, without his carefully crafted charm and confidence, he appeared smaller somehow, diminished. His eyes found mine as I took my seat, expecting to see anger or defiance. Instead, I recognized something entirely different: calculation. Even now, facing serious charges and overwhelming evidence, he was assessing angles, looking for leverage, measuring what he might extract from the situation. When he attempted to approach me during a recess, security intervened immediately. "Dawn," he called, his voice holding that familiar, persuasive tone. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. If we could just talk privately." I met his gaze calmly. "There's no misunderstanding, Robert. There's only accountability." The judge granted all the prosecution's motions, denying bail due to flight risk and setting a trial date 6 months out. All 3 defendants would remain in custody, their assets frozen, their freedom curtailed by the same legal system they had manipulated for years. As I left the courthouse, reporters called questions about the Black Widow investment scheme, the media's name for Robert and Chloe's operation. I declined comment, but couldn't help noticing the poetic justice. The man who had defined me as nothing but a financial resource was now defined by his financial crimes, his name becoming synonymous with betrayal and fraud. The consequences he had never anticipated when emptying our savings account while I gave birth had manifested fully. Not as revenge, but as the natural conclusion to choices made with arrogance and callousness. Justice, I realized, had its own elegant mathematics, a balancing of equations that Robert, for all his financial scheming, had failed to calculate correctly. 2 months after Robert's arrest, I sat in my grandfather's, now my office, reviewing correspondence that had arrived following the first news reports about the case. The twins napped in a portable crib nearby, growing stronger each day. At 12 weeks old, they were developing distinct personalities: Emma observant and thoughtful, Ethan expressive and energetic. Lisa entered with a tray of tea and more letters. "These came this morning, same as the others." I nodded, having expected this. Since the story broke, women had been coming forward, not just Robert's previous victims, but others who recognized the pattern from their own experiences with different perpetrators. Each letter shared a similar story: romance, financial integration, betrayal during vulnerability. "There are 17 new ones," Lisa noted. "That's 43 in total. And those are just the ones who felt comfortable writing to a stranger." I observed. The media had initially focused on the sensational aspects: the Black Widow investment scheme, the arrests, the multiple identities. But as the fuller story emerged, something unexpected happened. Women's financial publications began covering the case from a different angle, highlighting how financial exploitation often targeted women during major life transitions: marriage, pregnancy, illness, bereavement. My inbox filled with interview requests from financial advisors, women's advocacy groups, and parenting publications. The story had touched a nerve, revealing a type of vulnerability many women recognized but few had named. Monique knocked and entered with a visitor, Rebecca Matthews, financial crime specialist with the FBI. "Thanks for seeing me outside official channels," Rebecca said after introductions. "What began with your case has expanded significantly." She explained that the evidence seized from Robert, Chloe, and Monty had opened investigations into similar operations across 3 states. Financial predators targeting women during vulnerable transitions appeared to be a more organized phenomenon than previously recognized. "Your case created a template," Rebecca explained. "The documentation, the financial tracking, The coordination across jurisdictions, it's becoming a model for pursuing these crimes. After she left, Carl arrived with updates on the legal proceedings. Robert had rejected all plea offers, maintaining his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. Chloe and Monty, however, had both accepted agreements in exchange for testimony. The prosecutor expects Robert's trial to begin in approximately 4 months, Carl concluded. They've prioritized the case given the public interest. That public interest had created unexpected ripple effects in financial and legal communities. Several banks had contacted Morrison Financial about implementing similar security protocols to those that had flagged Robert's fraudulent activities. Law enforcement agencies had developed specialized training on financial exploitation in intimate relationships. Most surprising were the personal reactions. Neighbors who had known us as a couple sent supportive messages, often sharing their own observations of Robert's inconsistencies they'd noticed but never mentioned. Former colleagues offered assistance with rebuilding my professional network. Even Robert's family reached out. His sister, Diane, who had been estranged from him for years, contacted me through Carl. She suspected something wasn't right with his lifestyle, Carl explained. Says he exhibited similar patterns in his teen years: charm, manipulation, living beyond apparent means. Diane had valuable context to offer investigators about Robert's background and previous identities they hadn't yet discovered. Her cooperation strengthened the case further. The most meaningful ripple effect, however, came in an unexpected form. Margaret Phillips's sister, Jenny, now caring for Aiden, reached out through our legal team. After careful consideration and consultation with Aiden's therapist, she requested a meeting. She thinks it might help Aiden to know there are others who understand what it means to be deceived by Robert, Lisa explained, having spoken with Jenny directly. Not immediately, but perhaps when he's ready. She believes connecting with you and eventually the twins might help him feel less isolated in his experience. The thought of meeting my children's half-brother, another innocent, affected by Robert's schemes, filled me with complex emotions. Protective instinct for my babies, compassion for a boy who had lost his mother and now was losing his understanding of his father, and a sense of responsibility that extended beyond my immediate family. These expanding circles of impact continued outward from what had begun as my personal betrayal. Each ripple connected to others who had experienced similar harm, to professionals working to prevent future exploitation, to families rebuilding after deception. What Robert had intended as an isolated extraction of wealth had instead created a network of awareness, support, and prevention that would long outlast whatever sentence he ultimately received. That evening, as I nursed the twins in the quiet of the nursery, I reflected on these unexpected consequences. Robert had believed he was writing the end of our story when he emptied our accounts. Instead, he had inadvertently created the beginning of something much larger, a reassessment of how financial vulnerability intersects with life transitions, particularly for women. His betrayal, meant to diminish me, had instead expanded my understanding of purpose in ways neither of us could have anticipated. 1 year after giving birth to the twins, I stood at the podium addressing a conference of financial advisors, estate planners, and family law attorneys. Emma and Ethan, now toddling and curious about everything, remained at home with Monique, who had transitioned from crisis manager to cherished family friend. Financial vulnerability often coincides with life's most significant transitions. I explained to the attentive audience: marriage, parenthood, illness, bereavement, moments when we are focused on emotional needs rather than financial vigilance. My presentation outlined the patterns we had identified through analyzing dozens of cases similar to mine. The warning signs, the protective measures, the resources available to those who suspected exploitation. The response had been overwhelming. Professionals, eager to better serve clients during vulnerable periods. After the Robert Baker case made headlines, I had found myself unexpectedly positioned at the intersection of financial expertise and personal experience. Initially reluctant to step into a public role, I gradually recognized the unique perspective I could offer. What began as occasional speaking engagements evolved into Morrison Protection Strategies, a consultancy focused on financial security during life transitions. Working with a small team of dedicated professionals, we developed protocols for financial institutions, educational materials for healthcare providers who worked with new parents and the elderly, and direct services for those recovering from financial exploitation. Robert's trial had concluded 3 months earlier. Despite his continued denials, the evidence proved insurmountable. His sentence, 22 years for financial crimes, with additional charges related to Margaret's death, still pending, ensured he would no longer threaten vulnerable women. Chloe and Monty received reduced sentences in exchange for their testimony, though still substantial given their roles in the scheme. The restitution fund had begun distributing recovered assets to victims, with my portion directed to a foundation supporting children affected by financial crimes. The twins would never want materially, the Morrison Trust ensured that, but they would grow up understanding that financial security brought responsibility rather than entitlement. My most meaningful work, however, came through regular meetings with Aidan and his Aunt Jenny. Initially cautious, we had gradually built a relationship that acknowledged our complicated connection while focusing on the children's well-being. At 10, Aidan was thoughtful beyond his years, processing complex truths about his father with remarkable resilience. Watching Emma and Ethan interact with their half-brother during monthly visits had become a source of unexpected joy. These 3 children, connected through circumstances none of them had chosen, were forging bonds that transcended their father's betrayals. As I concluded my presentation and answered questions from the audience, I reflected on the journey from that hospital bed a year earlier. The woman who had awakened to discover her husband's betrayal while recovering from childbirth had undergone a profound metamorphosis. The transformation wasn't about financial recovery, professional reinvention, or even justice served, though all had occurred. It was about reclaiming the narrative, about refusing to be defined by victimization, about creating meaning from betrayal. Robert had seen me as nothing but a means to financial gain. In attempting to reduce me to a transaction, he had instead catalyzed my evolution into someone stronger, more purposeful, and more impactful than I might otherwise have become. His greatest miscalculation hadn't been underestimating my financial acumen or my family resources. It had been failing to recognize that in targeting me during what he perceived as my moment of greatest vulnerability, he had inadvertently triggered my most profound strength. While I was giving birth, my husband emptied our savings, but he didn't know about my family fortune. More importantly, he never realized that true wealth lies not in accounts or assets, but in resilience, purpose, and the legacy we create through how we transform our challenges. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.